Welcome back to the Emily Show, Law & Order. This week we have a lot to talk about before, well, a lot of travel coming up for me. So make sure you stay tuned in the Law & Order app because there's much that's going to go on, I'm sure. And I will do my best to keep you updated. Also, if you want to follow along with the adventures, I will be posting all of the things as we get into DCI Finals Week. But today we are going to take a look at everything that has happened now that we are 6 months in to the Nancy Guthrie case. Because when I saw what Pima County sheriffs posted on social media this week, and trust me, I went to see if they had also posted it on their official website. No, they just posted it on social. But when I saw what they posted on social this week, I was like, oh, that is something that we absolutely need to talk about. And then there are just a few updates after the conclusion of the David preliminary hearing. We'll talk about that at the end of the show today. I can't believe it has been 6 months since Nancy Guthrie went missing. And I can't believe that the updates we have from the sheriff are, well, what they are. Plus, Sheriff Nanos gave a new interview. We're going to look at that too. So let's get into it. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker. Yes, also a lawyer. And this is The Emily Show. I break down the pop culture, entertainment, and high-profile cases that we're all talking about. I know you want the facts, so let's get into it. Leonard, I still can't believe it's been 6 months since Nancy Guthrie seemingly vanished from her home in the middle of the night without a trace. I have been critical of this investigation. The more we learn about it, the more I continue to be critical of this investigation. We have not gotten to a point where I am less critical. I might have been a bit more empathetic to the potential overwhelm that investigators had in the beginning. However, the more that we look back at some of the decisions made early on in this investigation, the more concerned I become. And now that we are 6 months out, it's pretty clear that Pima County Sheriff's, who is still leading this investigation, still does not really have anything that they are actively following. And that's why I think we saw these posts on social media releasing two of the supposed, and I'm always going to say supposed, two of the supposed ransom notes that were received, because again, we do not know who wrote them. And in a high profile case, in notes that came in that are hard to trace, one never knows if they are authentic, if they are not authentic, and who sent them. Because again, the internet can 100% try to get involved, especially in high profile cases. So that is always my caveat. We're going to look at what Pima County Sheriff's released. We're going to look at those ransom notes. And then there was an interesting article from the Wall Street Journal from Valerie Ballerellin, who you might recognize as someone who was covering a lot of the Murdaugh case. But as I read through that article, there were a few things that they highlighted that I had not remembered happened early on in the case. And we're going to talk about a few of those things, and pointed out that it was only about 12 weeks before Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home that she had been on the Today Show with Savannah when they did a big segment together. I didn't remember how close that timing actually was, because 12 weeks is a pretty close in time period from when Nancy Guthrie was on the Today Show with her daughter. And now here we are 6 months later, still without knowing exactly what happened. Let's take a look at Pima County Sheriff's asking for help. From the desk of Sheriff Chris Nanos, Nancy Guthrie investigation update, video, and ransom note details. This was released on July 31st, 2026, and says, the Pima County Sheriff's Department and Federal Bureau of Investigation's Phoenix Field Office have been working together for the past 6 months to locate Nancy Guthrie. Nancy was last confirmed at her residence in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood in Tucson on the evening of January 31st, 2026. Through our collective investigative resources, with the assistance of the private sector, we have recovered videos from her residence showing an unidentified male who knows what happened to Nancy. You mean the videos that the FBI released months and months and months ago? They go on to say, 2 videos recovered from Nancy's doorbell camera may be from 2 separate days. And this is just my interjection, but if you were watching when I was streaming, when these were released, we went through them live, totally violating the no breaking news. But I had wondered if they were from two different points of time because there were so many details in what the individual was wearing that seemed to be different. And I had been curious about the timing of the two, and we didn't have a lot of information about the timing of the two. And it sounds like they still don't exactly know when those videos are from, which also causes me concern if when trying to retrieve any video artifacting that there isn't a substantial amount of metadata, either that or they aren't and are choosing not to share that with us because they say maybe from two separate days. These videos are critical to our understanding of the unidentified male's behaviors and choices. They indicate he took steps to prepare for the event, that is their words, not mine, on the night of January 31st to February 1st. Investigators continue to pursue every available technological and investigative lead. However, community members remain a vital resource as we seek to provide answers for Nancy's family. We would like to thank those who have already provided tips and information. We are asking for the public's continued assistance and are confident that you can further the effort. We know there are individuals familiar with this unidentified male who may have observed changes in his behavior around the time frame of the videos, to include a change in mood or displays of anxiety, nervousness or irritability, and these are bullet points, a change of physical appearance, hair color or cut, growth or removal of facial hair, etc., unexplained injuries, cuts on hands, bruises, etc. During the period Nancy was last seen, normal routine changes, missing work, classes, or appointments, sudden departures from the area around the time of her disappearance, vehicle cleaning or repairs, unexplained interest or disinterest in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, noticeable intense interest or disinterest in the investigation, or an unexplained knowledge of the situation. 2 ransom notes attached, and we're going to go through those in a minute, were sent to local and national media outlets that purport to have been written by kidnappers. The local CBS affiliate in Tucson, KOLD TV 13 News, received the first note on February 2nd and the second on February 6th. These communications revealed distinctive patterns of word choice, syntax, and phraseology that reflect the writer's unique linguistic style, or masking of any unique linguistic style. They also provide valuable insight into the person's mindset, motives, and the evolution of their tone over time. This assumes that those letters were sent by the same person, though. And that's an assumption that maybe you can't make. As with the unidentified male depicted in the video, we believe these distinctive linguistic characteristics may be recognizable to someone who knows or has interacted with the note's writer. A friend, family member, coworker, classmate, or acquaintance may recognize these patterns of expression and possesses information that could help identify the individual responsible. In some cases, there are times when people who may have knowledge initially do not come forward. This may be due to their close relationship with those who might be involved, as well as concern for their own safety, reputation, standing in the community, and amongst their friends. And yes, there is some kind of splotch at the bottom of their screenshot in the media release that they posted to their official account on social media. I have no idea what it is. It goes on to say, we recognize that relationships and loyalties change over time, as do people and their perspectives. It is not too late to come forward. Regardless of how insignificant you think your information may be, or whether you think we are already aware of it, please contact us. And then they include, if you have any information, please call 1-800-CALL-FBI or 88-CRIME. They say you can remain anonymous. There is a reward available for your information, and then they list the case number. What does that say to me? That they need more information, and they have gotten to the end of what they can do with at least this information. We're going to look at the 2 notes that they released. Both of these notes we have heard discussion of since early on in the case, mostly from TMZ, because TMZ said, well, we received notes and they were asking about this and then they were asking about that. And we don't want to give you the whole list of the notes, but we are telling you that there are notes, and then we're telling you what the follow-up notes say, and then what the next part of the notes say. But the notes that were released by Pima County Sheriff came through the media's tip line form on their website, where you've, I'm sure, seen these, where you can go to a website and fill out a contact form. that contact form might not capture as much tracking information as sending an email would. So these were things that were not emailed in. You will notice that there are some redactions to these. I will note that it seems that Pima County Sheriff, when they originally posted this on Facebook, did in fact post those unredacted. I have seen the unredacted ransom notes. The things redacted are a contact email address that is clearly a fake email address. The Bitcoin wallet number is redacted, and that's about it. Leonard, you've heard me talk so much about today's sponsor, Honeylove, because not only do I love their sleepwear, it is my absolute favorite, but they also have incredible bras and shapewear. And not feeling hot in my own skin while making sure that the girls look good is absolutely a priority. And Honeylove's bras are lightweight enough to be supportive, but also not make me feel like I have on way too many layers. And it's not surprising because Honeylove is an independent, female-founded brand, and all Honeylove products are intelligently designed by women who actually wear them. Their new crossover contour bra is a perfect example of them blending technology and their best-selling wireless design with molded foam cups that create a really supportive and natural shape, which, as we get older, we absolutely want. And their Cloud Embrace bra takes that to another level. It's soft and breathable and incredibly comfortable. Comfort isn't a luxury, it's a requirement. And support shouldn't mean sacrificing how you feel in your own skin. And Honeylove has that balance handled. So Leonard, it's time to treat yourself to the most advanced bras and shapewear on the market. Use our exclusive link to save 20% off Honeylove at honeylove.com/Leonard. That's honeylove.com/Leonard. And if they ask how you found out about them, let them know it was the Emily Show. It's time to experience a new standard in comfort and support with Honeylove. Now, let's get back to today's show. The first note that we are looking at is from February 2nd, 2026. It doesn't have a time on it. This came into the KOLD news desk. It's interesting to me that the subject of this is news tip, and it looks like that's a fillable field. It has a red asterisk next to subject, which indicates that field has to be filled out before it can be processed. And if you are trying to ransom Nancy Guthrie and you want this to have attention, like for real, why would the subject line be news tip? It just, again, seems odd to me. You don't call it Nancy Guthrie or Nancy Guthrie ransom or Nancy Guthrie urgent. Or, there are so many things other than news tip. It's odd to me. That's the first thing that stood out to me as we go through this. The next subject lines are name and email address. Those are redacted. And then it says question or comment, which is probably the menu that populates question or comment. Hello, Savannah. We have your mother, Nancy. She is safe but scared. She will be held for ransom, and once payment is received, she will be released unharmed. We will be holding her for a maximum of 7 days. You will need to send Bitcoin in the amount of 4 million USD before 5 p.m. on Thursday the 5th. If payment is not received, the ransom will be increased to 6 million USD, which will need to be paid by 5 p.m. on Monday the 9th. Once payment is received to the Bitcoin address below, she will be released within 12 hours of deposit to a safe drop-off location back in Tucson. The use of back in Tucson, assuming this is someone that did have Nancy Guthrie, is interesting. It seems to indicate that they're no longer in the area. Again, if this is even true. It goes on to say if payment is not received by the last deadline on Monday the 9th at 5 p.m., she will be killed. Your mother is aware of this and her life is in your hands. It is in the best interest of everyone to have this completed as soon as possible. You will not be able to contact me from here on out. Interesting that that goes from plural to singular. There will be no negotiation. Do not play games. Law enforcement will not be able to help you. And then it says she had a white smartwatch on the floor of the foot of her bed, and the white floodlight in the backyard was destroyed. And then it says, please enter your date of birth. That's redacted. I imagine whatever was entered in there was fake. And it says, I agree to the terms and conditions to submit this through the website. So there is some interesting details in that it switches from plural to singular. It tries to give specifying detail with regard to the smartwatch and the floodlight in the backyard, though this was also submitted at some point in time on February 2nd. I believe news was already out about lights and about the Ring camera light being destroyed, and that might have already been known. I do not believe that details about her watch were known at that point. And now we're going to take a look at what came in to the, contact us or the news tip page for KOLD. And we're going to take a look at what came in on February 6th. The second one comes in on February 6th. And what's interesting about that is, well, we know that they had established a deadline for the 4 million Bitcoin to be paid by Thursday the 5th, and then it would be increased. But they set the next deadline. Again, whoever wrote this set a purported deadline for 5 p.m. Monday the 9th. But another note comes in on the 6th, and we actually did see videos released by Savannah Guthrie seemingly in response to some of these letters. This one comes in again as a subject news tip. Name is redacted, email address is redacted, and these were fake names and email addresses that related back to Nancy Guthrie and Savannah Guthrie. And in the questioner comment, it says, Guthrie family, we did not fully grasp the seriousness of her physical condition. We never intended to hurt her. That was not our intention. She perished shortly after she was taken. We believe it was heart-related. She is buried in nature now. Nothing you could have done could have changed the outcome. We want your family to know this and hope you all can find peace. We are truly sorry. And then the Bitcoin address is redacted and the date of birth is redacted. The use of words here is interesting. Again, we saw Savannah Guthrie make videos that I've covered in other episodes of the podcast. We've seen her make videos responsive to these notes. And we talked about the fact that they were responsive. The way this is written is odd. It reads odd. And there was already public information at that point about Nancy Guthrie's physical condition, about her medication not being with her, about the family's concern about how long she would survive without her medication. There is nothing in this letter that indicates something specific that someone might know if they had her. Could someone fake this information with what was known publicly at the time? Yes, someone could have. But we also heard from Savannah that they believed that at least 2 of the ransom letters were real. And I would suspect that the 2 that the family believes are real are also these 2 that have been released. It remains odd to me that if this was ever a kidnap for ransom plan, that these letters came in this way and came in so late, because if there is a kidnap for ransom, generally there would be a plan to get the ransom. And when you are dealing with someone older, you would think that that plan would be put into effect urgently after it was discovered that she was missing. The sheriff's department is trying to generate more leads, more information, and see if anyone might know something that has not been disclosed in a tip yet, which means they are getting to a point where they don't have maybe much more to go on. Pima County Sheriff released that statement, these 2 purported ransom notes, and Sheriff Nanos also released another statement, which is difficult because every time Sheriff Nanos releases something, there are contradictions, it seems, to something else that's been said. So let's take a look and what Sheriff Nanos had to say in a video released onto their YouTube channel.
Sheriff, August 1st marks 6 months since Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home. Where does the investigation stand right now?
It's very active. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We've done a lot of work, but we still have more. And there's not just in DNA, where labs across the country are working together, but in forensics, analysis of thousands and thousands of videos, photos. And we also have still tens of thousands of tips that come in, and we actively work on them. So it's a very active investigation.
So why are you soliciting more tips? Why now? Why these tips? Also, do I know who's asking him the questions? No, it is probably their public information officer from the sheriff's department, but I don't know exactly who is asking the questions, but the microphone is very close to them.
The department released 2 ransom notes. Why now?
Well, at least they followed up on the question that I thought was the natural next question.
Well, really 2 reasons. One, it's out there. People have been, media has covered some of this, and we just saw what was being said and felt like we need to put something out that's really accurate. And this was the time. We felt like, investigators felt like there's a number of pieces of information in these notes that it just might jar someone to say, I've heard that, or the wording, the style of the writing is, might jog somebody to kind of think about who would have written this? How was this done? I think anybody who reads them, my investigators, we look at it, and clearly there's things in there that are very concerning to our investigative team. So we hope that by releasing the actual note, we'll get some response from the community.
Did the Guthrie family know you'd be releasing
Absolutely, absolutely.
6 months in, what's your relationship with the FBI?
It's a good relationship.
Why are we asking about the relationship with the FBI? Has there been ongoing discussion about this? And also, if this is already out in the public, it was out in the public in March. Why wait until August to release them if you're trying to correct the record?
It's always been a good relationship. We've been a member of what is known as the Southern Arizona Violent Crime Task Force, headed up by the FBI, for decades. We've always participated, and to this day we still do. It's not just a great relationship; it's one that's very valued.
What's your message to the community?
We think somebody knows something. We hope that by releasing some of this information.
Yes, I agree. Look, I can agree with that. I agree with that. Somebody knows something. Probably more than one somebody knows something.
It will jog somebody to think about what.
I don't want anybody thinking about it. Can we get people telling about it?
A lot of people have called us with information, but we also know a lot of people are hesitant to do so. And so I hope that by constantly reminding the public, we're here, we're not going anywhere. If you have information, someone knows who this person is. Someone knows something. We want that person to call us. We need that phone call.
Why haven't you held a press conference about this case?
The press conferences are.
Why are we answering the internet? This is a 6-month update. Actually, I think too many press conferences at the beginning were a problem because they were contradictory. So if the live format of the press conference doesn't work well for this sheriff, it's okay to just put out a written update.
Are actually more designed for when you have a very specific piece of information that you want out in front and you need help with, we do that. In this regard, we felt like just a media release was sufficient.
So
what's your message to the Guthrie family?
So why a video?
We're still here. We are not going away. If you could just see the team working, you would see the energy, the concern. They're fired up, and we'll continue to work this case hard.
Is there anything that I forgot to ask or that you want to add?
You know, there is a number of issues have been brought up about people being cleared of this investigation. You know, we served a few search warrants. We talked to individuals, and we moved.
Well, this is a really interesting choice. I'm going to need you, dearest Lawnard listener, I'm going to need you to just pay attention to this answer because we are going to talk about it next. The Sheriff's Department has been served notice that they will be sued by individuals who were detained and questioned in this case. Remember, we saw this in the Reed case where you have to serve government entities notice. You can't just file the lawsuit. Right. Well, those notices have been filed. It's very interesting to choose to comment about anyone being cleared or not cleared given that context. I didn't know that he was going to talk about this in his press conference, or we would have brought the lawsuits up before, but we're going to get to those immediately next.
There's a number of issues have been brought up about people being cleared of this investigation. You know, we served a few search warrants. We talked to individuals, and we move on because if the evidence is there, we continue that path. But that doesn't mean those individuals are cleared. It just means that we met with them because we felt like there was a need. There was probable cause established through evidence, tips, whatever, and presented to a court, and we went on. Does that mean those individuals are cleared? Not necessarily. It just means that we took a look at something that was concerning to us, and now the evidence takes us elsewhere. But more to that point, I can't be any more clear. I said this earlier on, and I say it again. The Guthrie family is not and have not been suspects in this investigation. We have talked with them, worked with them. They are not suspects. They are victims of a very horrific crime.
Okay, but doesn't everyone start out as a suspect in just about every investigation and you can clear them as you go? We're going to have to talk about a lot of what he just said because he indicated that there was probable cause and that it went through court, but it seems that he is not talking about things like, of course, a preliminary hearing. He's talking about a search warrant, which requires probable cause, and search warrants were served. So I think that's what he's referencing. And then talking about the fact that, well, no one's been cleared, but we went a different direction because you didn't have enough information to arrest someone. Because if you had enough information to arrest someone, you wouldn't just have them out in the public for the following 6 months.
If someone does have information that may help investigators, where should they call?
Either tip line, 1-800-CALL-FBI or 520-351-4900 is the Sheriff's
That's useful information. They could have put that at the beginning.
Department tip line. You can even call 911.
Don't do that.
I need you to call.
Don't call 911. No, veto. Do not call 911. Do not call the emergency line with tips.
Either tip line, 1-800-CALL-FBI
That one.
or 520-351-4900 is the Sheriff's Department tip line. You can even call 911.
Don't do that.
We just need you to call.
So, Sheriff Nanos has taken the opportunity to release not just a press release, but a sit-down interview style statement to the media, saying that the Guthrie family has absolutely been cleared, but nobody else has been cleared, but the Guthrie family has been cleared. And that if anyone has any information to call the FBI or the sheriffs, we're not even going to respond to the rest of that. You know how I feel about it. But yes, there are people who know more about this case that have not shared that information. Of course there are. Nancy Guthrie did not leave her home of her own volition. One of the things that struck me when I was looking at the Wall Street Journal article, and it was a very thorough look back at the timeline of everything, concerning to me were a few things pointed out in this article. One, that in their reporting and conversations with others at the Sheriff's Department, the Wall Street Journal is reporting, quote, "The case had trouble from the start. County Sheriff's deputies at first minimized the importance of dried blood found on Nancy's front porch. They failed to seal off the property with police tape to protect sensitive crime scene evidence, allowing reporters, live streamers, and Amazon and pizza delivery drivers entry to the front porch. Investigators spent precious hours deciding whether Nancy was kidnapped or lost. A search and rescue plane sat grounded until dusk, awaiting a deputy trained to operate its sophisticated surveillance team." But that's not all, because there's more about why they didn't have anyone to operate that search and rescue plane. And when you are in a jurisdiction with this much desert and open terrain, of course they have a search and rescue plane. But grounding it until dusk, when that was not the intention, is a problem. And this is a problem that we have seen the threads of pulled on by the Pima County Board of Supervisors. The article goes on to tell us that around 2 p.m. on February 1st, the day that Nancy was reported missing, the Sheriff's Department lead supervisor on the scene texted Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos, alerting him to a missing person case. Then they talk about Annie Guthrie and her siblings not really being able to wrap their mind around the fact that their mother was missing, that their mother was mentally sharp but physically frail, barely able to walk to the mailbox and back, and they told deputies that. Annie pointed out that the Nest doorbell camera was missing. Quote, "Something is wrong," the supervisor told Nanos in a text minutes later. "We're calling homicide." The fact that they quickly called in homicide and still didn't appreciate and take care to preserve the blood on the front steps causes me a lot of concern, because if that had been a mixed sample, you could potentially have a lot of information. We know that that DNA has been tested. We know that it came back only to Nancy Guthrie, but they don't know that then. The article goes on to talk about the division within the Sheriff's Department and the difficulty in Nanos's run for sheriff in November of 2024 and the fallout from that. Nanos won in a recount, and they say after winning in a recount, Nanos sidelined deputies who had supported Lappin, the person running against him, according to people familiar with the matter. And we've seen the sheriff's own union come out and be incredibly critical of this. They then go on to point out a few things that I think are of note. One, Nanos's appointed head of homicide, Sergeant David Stivers, Stivers, was reprimanded 2 months before Nancy's kidnapping for quote unquote poor judgment, blamed for delays securing crime scene evidence in a homicide case, and personnel records from a public records request support that information. They then go on to say that charges in the homicide case were dropped for insufficient evidence. They then say that this is the detective and the lead investigator that showed up at Nancy's house in the late afternoon on Sunday, February 1st. It goes on to say that for hours they gave little regard to the dried blood on the front porch, which we saw reported earlier in the article, and they suspected that the blood might have come from some unrelated head bump, nosebleed, or other incidental injury. But you don't know that if you don't preserve it and test it. They go on to say that the Sheriff's Department launched drones. Border Patrol went out with their search dogs, but the sheriff's, their reporting says, most powerful search and rescue tool was delayed for hours. The department's $1.7 million Cessna surveillance aircraft, equipped with both infrared and zoom lens cameras, is the equipment that was grounded. The problem was finding a flight deputy to operate the camera systems. The senior pilot assigned to the Sunday shift was demoted days earlier to patrol duty following a workplace complaint. He, too, had backed Nanos's Challenger. The flight data shows that the plane began its search around 6:30 p.m., and by then it was getting too dark for its zoom lens camera to be of much use. At 9 p.m., Nanos told news outside of Guthrie's home, quote, "We're just kind of working it from two angles, a rescue mission or a possible crime." So when you look at the crossroads of a very tense political campaign that seems to have divided this sheriff's department, and then those who supported the opposition getting, well, demoted into less desirable positions, and then bringing complaints against their department for getting demoted to those less desirable positions, which they will probably be compensated for. And I'm sure some of them may sue for, because what you can't do is retaliate against people by demoting them because they supported someone else to run for sheriff. However, all of that seemed to come to a head in the fact that they didn't have someone to launch their search and rescue plane in the hours immediately following a report of a missing person. And you never know what information is forever lost because of what seems to be political retaliation, at least as it's reported here. There's one more thing in this article that was something I had forgotten about. And the article quoted something that Sheriff Nanos said at the beginning of his press conference on February 3rd. And it seemed so far-fetched to me that I actually needed to go and pull the press conference for myself to take a look, because I was dumbfounded reading it in black and white. So we're going to look at that press conference together, because in hindsight, it's even more concerning. Leonard, a quick moment to thank today's sponsor, Gusto. Not only are they a sponsor of The Emily Show, but they've also been our payroll software, but they do so much more. Gusto is an online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses like mine. It's all-in-one, remote-friendly, and incredibly easy to use, so you can pay, hire, onboard, and support your team from anywhere. What I appreciate is that it doesn't matter that we have employees in different states. It makes it easy to not just onboard, but also they have direct access to certified HR experts. Plus, with Gusto, you can take care of everything in one place, not just your HR needs, but they have built-in automation tools and unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price. But that also includes your payroll tax filing, simple direct deposit, health benefits, managing any other types of benefits like workers' comp, 401k, commuter benefits, or whatever you offer to your team. So not only is it simple and powerful, but it's also flexible. You can try Gusto today at gusto.com/Leonard and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/Leonard. That's right, gusto.com/Leonard. Now, let's get back to today's episode.
This is really, for me, pretty new, all the media attention. So I apologize to you for sometimes I'm speaking in generalities, and I'm not used to everybody hanging on to my words and then trying to hold me accountable for what I say. But
I'm not used to everyone holding on to my words and then trying to hold me accountable for what I say. That was February 3rd. And by this point, there was already quite a lot of confusion in this case. Things that had been said and retracted, things that shifted, timelines that shifted. And I wanted to go back and see for myself. But Nanos is standing in front of the media saying, this is all new to me. However, Nanos, you had just invited and in fact had completed a full season of a reality television show called Desert Law with A&E. You had invited reality TV cameras into your department. So I don't know what to believe. Because, I'm not used to all of this and this and that. Well, you're not used to the media, but you wanted the media to be present in your department because Desert Law started airing in January of 2026. Did you want to liaise with the media, or do you not want to liaise with the media? And I think that it was probably the reception of people saying, well, first you said this and then you said this and now you're saying this, that has caused confusion continuously in this case. I'm not used to everyone hanging on my words and then trying to hold me accountable for what I say was quoted in the article. And it was so wild to me that I very much wanted to go back and look at how this was approached at the press conference. And sir, if you do not want to give press conferences, you have a public information officer. Your public information officer can liaise with the press, or you can give written updates to the press. There are a number of ways to do it. It just needs to be consistent. And Sheriff Nanos has not been incredibly consistent in this case. And there have been times where we have seen him cherry pick media outlets to give interviews to or not give interviews to. We have talked about this previously in the podcast in the context of the concern from the Board of Supervisors who have brought up things like the fact that Nanos is emailing a reporter on a reply all email that was telling others in the office to just ignore her, but also replied to that reporter. We have seen a lot of wildness in this case, and I imagine that that has to leave the Guthrie family with concern and perhaps a lack of confidence in what might happen next. And then when you get to 6 months down the road with the department releasing things and saying, if anyone else knows anything else, please send us more tips. The behavior of the sheriff's department asking for more tips and saying, well, we have tens of thousands of tips. Well, it seems that they still need more information. And I hope that at some point in all of this, the Guthrie family is able to find closure and maybe have some answers in what happened here. But the longer this goes, the less likely it is that they are going to have those answers. Savannah Guthrie also released a bit more of a statement on Instagram with a photo of her mother on August 1st. Again, the 6-month anniversary. I don't know if there's a better word for that, but marking the 6 months of her mom being missing. And in that post, Savannah Guthrie wrote, "This is our beautiful mom," again, with a picture of Nancy Guthrie. "6 months ago, someone took her out of her bed in the dead of night. We have lived every moment, every breath, and every heartbeat in agony and despair ever since. Every day we wake up and try to be strong and go on, because that's what our joyful and resilient mom taught us to do. But make no mistake, our hearts are in ruins. Cam and Christine, Annie and Tommy, Mike and me, we spend every waking moment thinking of her, longing for her, looking for her. There is a hole inside us that can never be filled. There is an ache that cannot be softened, and there is a determination in us that cannot be quenched to find out what happened to her so that we can give her the dignity of a proper goodbye, a celebration of her remarkable life that she so deserves. We are begging for help. We are desperate. We need someone to come forward. Someone knows something. Someone suspects something. Someone recognizes the writing in the ransom demand notes. Someone has noticed something different, strange, troubling, or just unusual, perhaps with someone they deeply love. Perhaps they are afraid to come forward. Perhaps they are conflicted. Perhaps they are angry or upset for being in this situation. There is a way out. To tell what you know. You can do so anonymously. The reward is available. There is a way to end this situation and do the right thing. We are real people facing real grief, doing the best we can, and counting our many blessings along the way, most especially the prayers and love from good people, which we feel deeply. We need your prayers. We need your kindness. We need the good to be stronger than the evil. If you are following this story for entertainment or for profit, you are not on her side. You are part of the harm perpetrated against her. We will never stop looking for answers, and we will never stop looking for the light. We will always be hoping and praying and believing in the best of our world. In spite of the circumstance, this is what our faith makes possible. Please bring her home. And I share that, one, because maybe Savannah's words will reach people more than the words of Sheriff Nanos. And two, it does seem to indicate that they knew that the ransom notes were going to be coming forward, or at least after they were released the day before, that they acknowledged their release. It's just such a difficult situation for the family to be in with the unknown. I don't know, now that we are 6 months out, if answers are going to be forthcoming at any time, which also seems kind of inexplicable. We live in an age with so much technology, and we have seen technology solve so many cases. It's truly unfathomable that someone can be taken from their home and then there's nothing. And I think that's what's so hard about this case is for the family, of course, the unknown and the fear. But I think for everyone, the unknown and the fear that someone can just be taken from their homes and then nothing. There are things in the way this case has unfolded that cause me concern. There are things that unfolded in the early hours of this investigation that one would hope to see be done differently. But you can't really go back and undo that. I hope that there is still DNA that they are testing, that there are still leads that they haven't tracked down, and that maybe as people get comfortable, that more will come to light, or maybe releasing the ransom notes is really just trying to see what happens next. And maybe that will be fruitful. I hope for the family that it is. But with that, there are also lawsuits that might be coming down the road, because we started seeing reports this week that the individuals who were detained and questioned by Pima County sheriffs have sent Pima County notice of their intent to sue. Remember, those processes take time. It is different in each jurisdiction, but can be up to 6 months before you can file suit after you give notice. And we're going to look at that just real quickly before we do updates in the David case. This is coming to us from NBC. It was their local affiliate that saw and were first reporting on the intent to sue. Their headline is "Men Detained in Guthrie Investigation File Notice of a Claim Against Pima County Sheriff." This article is from July 31st. It's so interesting to me that Sheriff Nanos would then seemingly comment on this on the video that they released on August 1st. They say lawyers for 2 Arizona men detained during the search for Nancy Guthrie, as well as the mother of one of the men, have issued a notice of claim against the Pima County Sheriff and a detective. The notice of claim, which is the precursor to a possible lawsuit, is addressed to Sheriff Chris Nanos and a detective. It alleges wrongful arrest and property damage. But there's more. One of the men named in the claim was detained February 10th for questioning and released later without charges as authorities searched for the kidnapper of Nancy Guthrie. The same day, another man, Daniel Maddox, was placed in handcuffs at the home that was searched and held for several hours, the notice says. It also names his mother, who owns the home, and alleged damage to the property. The notice, dated Monday, was obtained by KVOA of Tucson, says that the deputies, quote, arrested Carlos at gunpoint and held him without probable cause for approximately 7 to 8 hours, and that an arrest was made in a public fashion. Now, Sheriff Nanos said that there were search warrants on this. If there was also an arrest warrant, that would be different. I imagine that the argument from the sheriff's department here, and that does not mean I agree with the sheriff's department, I'm just saying I imagine the argument from the sheriff's department will be that he was detained subject and pursuant to the search, and he was not, in fact, under arrest. But we will see what happens with that. Their notice to sue says that he was arrested and held without probable cause for approximately 7 to 8 hours, and that's going to be very fact specific. They also say in the notice that the home was, quote unquote, ransacked It also alleges physical, emotional, and reputational harm. It says that Nanos posted on social media that a person had been arrested and that, quote, the subject is currently being questioned in connection to the Nancy Guthrie investigation. That post, in conjunction with statements from the sheriff's office, made Palazuelos look like a suspect to the world, the notice says. They go on to quote it saying, despite requests by undersigned counsel, the lawyers for the individual, Sheriff Nanos and the Pima County Sheriff's Department have refused to retract their statements or to make clear that Carlos is innocent and had no involvement in the Guthrie case. The Sheriff's Department said it does not comment on pending litigation. Quote, the sheriff has said in multiple interviews that no one has been cleared in this case, the office said. This is an ongoing and active investigation. And then it seems that the sheriff doubled down in his August 1st statement, saying that search warrants were issued, people were detained and questioned. Being detained is different than being arrested legally, and seemed to comment on this circumstance expressly. So I will be keeping an eye to see if these lawsuits do get filed. They are alleging a variety of different kinds of emotional distress. The search warrants should then be at issue in these lawsuits, and maybe then we will see them. I imagine there will be some pushback from Pima County Sheriff because this will be an ongoing investigation and they are not going to want those search warrants to be out there publicly. But if and when the time expires for them to be able to file a lawsuit, well, that's going to be part of the discovery. However, we have seen how hesitant departments can be when turning over, especially information in ongoing investigations, even as part of civil discovery. I am keeping an eye on that. It's just really interesting to see a seeming response to this the very next day of news breaking on this. So with that, I do hope that we learn more in the Guthrie case. I hope that the family at some point gets closure. And I know with this many unknowns that is going to be incredibly difficult. And I think Savannah expressed that in her post incredibly well, how difficult it is to move on, even in grief, when there are still so many unknowns. It leaves them in a really horrific limbo. And that's just really unfathomable for most of us. So I guess from horrible to horrible, we're going to talk a little bit about the David case. Leonard, a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Lola Blanket, because everything in today's episode does make me want to climb into a warm, cozy blanket. And today I have the one that I am sending off with Travis to college. It is so delicious and yummy. I love this gray. I love that it is machine washable so he can take care of it while he is at school, and also that he can take a part of home with him. And I am just going to wrap myself up in this for the next week until that happens. So whether or not you've got somebody moving in and starting college, living in their first apartment, having a baby, or any other of the things that we go through in life where a blanket just feels like a hug, Lola Blankets is a perfect gift. And in fact, I got my first Lola blanket as a gift, and it has quickly become one of my favorite things to gift. And if you're thinking, Emily, it would be amazing if they had weighted blankets. Well, Lola Blankets does in fact offer weighted blankets with the same luxurious feel that we always talk about on The Emily Show. And you don't have to take my word for how amazingly cozy, schmooshy, and perfect this blanket is. It has over 20,000 five-star reviews. There really is a reason that it's called the world's #1 blanket. So Leonard, for a limited time, our listeners get 40% off select Lola Blanket products with code Leonard at checkout. Just head to lolablankets.com and use code Leonard. And after purchase, if they ask how you heard about them, let them know it was The Emily Show. Wrap yourself in luxury with Lola Blankets. Now, let's get back to it. And when I say we are going to talk a little bit about the David case, I mean a little bit. When we last talked about the David case, we were talking about the preliminary hearing and what was going to happen next. But the final day of the preliminary hearing had not happened yet at the time that episode aired, though I said that it was my belief that that would be held to answer and it would be set on the path towards trial. And that is, in fact, exactly what happened. On July 27th, Judge Olmedo held the case to answer. That's what it's called when they find that there is sufficient probable cause to hold the person who's accused of the thing over for trial for the thing. David still remains with no bond set, and it's set for an arraignment on the information on August 31st, 2026. What will happen at arraignment? Well, he will probably waive reading of the information. He will be arraigned. These are the charges against you on the information. That means it's gone past the complaint. It's gone past preliminary hearing. And then we will see the defense maybe ask for a detention hearing to consider bond, though I think that's probably unlikely, though it's possible. And we will start to see the pretrial litigation moving towards trial. The thing that we talked about a little bit in the last episode of the podcast was that the defense can now ask for a speedy trial. Just because they waived right to speedy preliminary hearing, and only by a bit, but just because they waived time on the preliminary hearing does not waive time for speedy trial. So the clock starts over again, and that's a 60-day clock. Do I think this will go to trial within 60 days? No. No, I don't. No, I don't at all. But the defense could ask for it to stay within the period right up until the end of that 60-day period. I don't think the judge would be thrilled if that was the tactic. I think the judge would want a realistic, you can't just set this for 60 days if you're not in any way going to be ready, because it requires the court that it's specially assigned to clear their calendar and start potentially looking for a death penalty qualified jury, which is a more time consuming process than finding a jury for a murder case. And because of the charges in this case are not just murder, but also the dismemberment, also the continuing sexual abuse, it adds layers of difficulty to finding jurors who will be able to sit neutrally on this case. And then you add a layer of high profile case to it, and it is going to take time. So what's going to happen from here? He is going to be arraigned on the 31st, and then new dates will be set, and we will get a sense of how long this will take to go to trial. The Special Circumstance Committee in Los Angeles will meet and decide how they are going to proceed with this case. And that might happen sooner rather than later if the defense does not waive time for speedy trial. But I do think ultimately this will not go to trial in the next 60 days. We are going to take a look just briefly at what the elected district attorney, D.A. Hochman, had to say about this case after David was held to answer and bound over for trial. It's a fairly brief press conference, but the prosecutor who is prosecuting this, Beth Silverman, was also present at that press conference. So we're going to take a look at that real quick. He does not go into a ton of detail about the case, and we'll give an overview in their own words of what's going to happen next, which, given that this was the office I worked at, is largely what we've already talked about. But in his own words, let's take a look at what happened after court on July 27th, 2026.
Good afternoon. My name is Nathan Hochman. I'm the Los Angeles County District Attorney. Today I am here to announce that Judge Charlene Olmedo held David Anthony Burke, who goes by the name of a singer David spelled D4VD, to answer for the horrific and barbaric killing of a 14-year-old at the time, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She has held him to answer for first-degree murder with the special circumstances of lying in wait, doing this crime for financial gain, and murdering a witness to an investigation. David Anthony Burke has also been held to answer for the mutilation of the remains of Celeste Rivas Hernandez on September 8th, 2025, and he has also been held to answer for engaging in continuous lewd and lascivious acts with a 13-year-old. What we have seen in this preliminary hearing, and the preliminary hearing was conducted by one of our most experienced deputy district attorneys, who is right here, Beth Silverman, and her team, working with the Los Angeles Police Department's Robbery Homicide Division. They methodically presented over 5 different days before Judge Olmedo the evidence that showed, and at this point we had to show it by probable cause, but by probable cause, and I would argue by an overwhelming amount of probable cause, and we will eventually prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. It followed the timeline of the interactions between Celeste Rivas Hernandez when she started as a 12-year-old, then a 13-year-old, then a 14-year-old who never got to see her 15th birthday. Because in the intervening time where she had these interactions with Mr. Burke, he engaged in this sexual conduct with a 13-year-old repeatedly, over and over again. This came out in text messages that were presented, in videos and photographs that were presented to the judge that showed this sexual activity. Ms. Silverman methodically tracked the timeline of their interactions during 2022, 23, 24, 25, that eventually led to the time where Celeste Rivas Hernandez went over to Mr. Burke's house in the Hollywood Hills on April 23rd, 2025, and has never been heard of again. But what Ms. Silverman and her team were able to show to Judge Olmedo is that on April 23rd, 2025, what actually happened was the brutal and horrific murder of Ms. Hernandez, and thereafter, over the ensuing 5 months, how her body was chopped up, left in the front trunk of a Tesla, only to be discovered on September 8th, 2025, after the car, and this is Mr. Burke's car, had been towed to a tow yard. What now happens is that there will be an information that will be filed within the next week or so. That information will track these 3 felony counts that have already appeared in the complaint. August 31st will be the arraignment on that information. Thereafter, there will be a trial that will be set. That trial can be set as early as 60 days. And as we saw with the preliminary hearing, where the defense demanded that they have that preliminary hearing done within the time that the law allows, whatever time they want a preliminary hearing, we were ready. Often preliminary hearings in a case of this complexity take many, many more months than you have seen in this case. But when the defense demanded a quick preliminary hearing, we said, bring it on. And that's exactly what we did. If the defense wants a trial 60 days out or whenever they want this trial, we will be ready for that trial. So at this point, again, we don't have the one additional consideration is that Mr. Burke now is eligible for death penalty. The death penalty considerations are now being weighed. Part of that consideration will be any submission that the defense wants to submit to the district attorney's office. It is something that we will consider on whether or not we will seek the death penalty. At this point, the death penalty determination has not been made.
So from the District Attorney of Los Angeles County, the Special Circumstance Committee will be considering information from the defense, which we talked about last week. The decision has not been made yet about how they will pursue this case, and it could be either in this case. And then we will see if this case goes forward to trial. He did note that if the defense wanted to pursue this in a speedy trial in 60 days, that the DA's office would be ready. The reason that that doesn't give me as much of a pause is because the district attorney's office had quite a lot of time with this case prior to the case being filed and prior to any arrest of David being made. So I imagine that quite a lot of the work that they've done in the case to get it ready for trial is already done because they did not arrest David the day that Celeste's remains were identified. They did all of their investigation after that discovery was made, before the arrest was made, including the investigative grand jury, which means the defense has quite a lot of catching up to do. But we heard in the hearings before this went to preliminary hearing that the defense did have at least the majority of the discovery. There is some discovery in this case that the defense will not be given, and that is the materials that were on David's phone and any other digital devices depicting any photos or acts with Celeste. Those will be held at the police department. Those have to be viewed by the defense separately. Those are not provided in discovery. They are made available if the defense wants to inspect them, but they are not given as a part of discovery, which is absolutely lawful and the norm in cases involving the images and sexual images of minors. So with that, we will be keeping an eye on how this case moves forward. As a reminder, there are not going to be cameras in the courtroom in the David prosecution. I will keep giving you updates in the podcast so you know legally what is happening, but we probably won't hear a lot in this case until it goes to arraignment and then until we see a trial date. I will be surprised if it goes to trial on the first trial date set, but then again, the cases that I cover never fail to surprise me. And then as it gets closer to going to trial, we'll talk about how we will cover the information coming out in trial. I will keep you posted on that case and so many others because there are a lot of updates that we have not yet gotten to. But it's time for me to go see my kiddo perform with the Cavaliers in Indianapolis for DCI finals and to get him moved into college. So it's going to be a busy few weeks for EDB. I will not be streaming while I am traveling, and I will not be back on the podcast until the middle of August. But don't worry, we're going to have plenty to catch up on when I get back. And if anything wild happens, I will send you a message in the Law Nerd app and say, yes, I've seen this. This is what it means. I will cover it when we get back because yes, things always happen while we travel, but my focus is going to be on what's going on, well, at Lucas Oil Stadium. That's where my focus is going to be for at least the next week. And then move in after that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a law nerd. And thank you for understanding this wonderful and wild summer of family and adulting and all the rest of it. I'm glad to cover these cases with you. I appreciate seeing all of you in the comments when the podcast drops on Monday, saying that this is where you come to find out what the facts are, especially on the most difficult cases that we talk about here. Thank you for that. And thank you for understanding why I'm not covering trials right now during the summer, as there is so much going on. I cannot cover them day to day. I appreciate your understanding. And as always, I appreciate you. So Law Nerd, I will see you soon. Bye. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the Law Nerd app at lawnerdapp.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Law Nerd.